So welcome everyone to the 15th Annual Buffalo International Film Festival. We have a special treat here today, panel on location. These two fantastic films and these four fantastic filmmakers all shot at least part of their film here in Buffalo. But before we hop into the panel, first I want to acknowledge where we are. We're on Haudenosaunee territory, the land of the Seneca. We're grateful to be here, Yahweh. I also want to acknowledge that we have some wonderful sponsors that made this all possible. The New York State Council of the Arts Electronic Film and Media Program, Erie County Arts and Cultural Funding, North Park Theater, Birchfield Penny Arts Center, this beautiful museum that we're at right now, City of Buffalo, Delaware District, Canadian Consulate General in New York State, Lelena, Lipsitz Green, Chennai, Cambria, Media Arts Assistance Fund, Albright Knox Art Gallery, Squeaky Wheel Film and Media Arts Center, Hallwell's Contemporary Art Center, Art Services Initiative of Western New York, Buffalo, Toronto Public Media, Duende, Siler City, The Trough, Whitland Canyon Drive, Canisius College, 500 Pearl Street, Beauty View Ranch, Hurdle Business Avenue Association, Bar de la Cita, Home Life Hostel Buffalo, Niagara, the Arts Access Program, and last but certainly not least, Tito's homemade vodka. Thank you all so much for being here. Perhaps we could just start by everyone introducing themselves, saying a little bit about the film that you worked on and what your role was. Is that cool? Yeah. All right.
Hi there, I'm Steve Rivo. I am the producer and co-writer of a documentary film called Bitchin, The Sound and Fury of Rick James, who is from Buffalo. As if everyone in Buffalo doesn't already know that Rick James is from Buffalo. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having our film in the festival and having us on the panel.
Hi, my name is Sacha Jenkins. I'm the director of Bitchin, The Sound and Fury of Rick James, and Steve, the producer, his family has origins in Buffalo.
Wachia, Netasulis, Keo, Mikonono, Greece, Nutama, Sikanka, Wampanoag. Greetings, my name is Katie Mikonono, Greece, and I'm from the Sikanka Wampanoag tribe. I was the star in the movie called Catch the Fair One, and also I was a co-writer for the film.
And hi, I'm Kim Parker. I was a producer on Catch the Fair One.
Amazing. So let me start off by asking a question about location. Do you want to just speak generally about your experiences here in Buffalo? And we'll kind of dive into conceptual locations. Is that cool? Sure. Okay. Yeah, you can go in any order.
Well, we filmed all of Catch the Fair One in the Buffalo area, all of principal photography. We did do a couple shots in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where the director lives during post, but I really don't count those. They were of hands and stuff. And so we filmed in very cold and magnificent locations, mansions and train yards and all sorts of crazy bombed out looking buildings. And it was a wild ride across the socioeconomic spectrum of this area. And it was very cold. We shot through the Thanksgiving holiday, essentially, into mid-December of 2019. So it's very cold to film here.
That's a piggyback off of Kim. Yes, it was freezing, and somehow my character didn't manage to find a bubble coat or a North Face or anything, but cinematically and just aesthetically, it was really awesome to have this location, and just even the artsy feel of this entire city. It was just, we couldn't have shot it anywhere else. We had a vision of what we wanted the film to look like, and as soon as Joseph sent me a little snippet video of where he was on location scouting, I was like, absolutely, yep, I don't care wherever you go, we have to film here, and it was an amazing experience. The cold here, though, was something special, I gotta say, but it was amazing.
Awesome.
What time of year did we come here again?
First weekend in November.
Dia de los Muertos.
Right. It wasn't that cold. It wasn't that bad.
It was great.
When you make a film about Rick James, you got to go back to the essence, and the essence is here in Buffalo. So we went back to. There's nothing like shooting drone shots over housing projects. I love that. There's nothing like shooting drone shots over abandoned projects. But we went back to where he grew up and were able to explore. And I had never been to Buffalo really before. And so, looking at a so-called Rust Belt city now and how things have changed and, where Rick came from and how even those neighborhoods have changed was really interesting. And we couldn't have made the film without coming here. And I think the film unpacks a bit of Buffalo's history, which I think most people don't know. And so people who are from Buffalo and people who aren't from Buffalo appreciated that and felt like they learned something. So that's always nice.
Yeah, it was our first shoot. We started the research on the film in like September of 2019, and when you start a documentary, it's a lot of pre-production research and thinking and writing treatments and figuring out, okay, who are we going to interview and where are we going to go and what do we need to, gather the building blocks that we're going to need to edit the story in post. We knew we wanted to come to Buffalo. We were excited about that. But the reason that the shoot happened when it happened was we were looking into getting in touch with Rick's band, the Stone City Band, from all from Buffalo, and we were sort of poking around the internet to see, if the band was put together, where the guys were, who was even in the band. I mean, it wasn't something that we all had like firsthand knowledge of. And the first thing that popped up when we Googled Stone City Band was their Facebook page, and the first thing on the Facebook page was they're having a reunion show November 1st or 2nd, 2019, and so everyone in the room, we were just like, that's our first shoot. We gotta go to Buffalo, and it was perfect because in order to, it's like stars lining up for a documentary filmmaker. Like, oh my God, we're looking to find the band members who wrote, who performed and wrote music with this guy, and they're all getting together 20, 30 years later to play a show right at the beginning of our production. So that sort of, was the anchor, and then we planned to shoot around that. And we had a great local crew who helped us, including Anna. Yeah, they were super, super cool. And that's also one of the great things about doing documentaries. The way that we do them, most people do them, is you bring sort of your principal crew members, director, producers, cinematographer, usually DP, from your own stable. But then the cities that we go to, we hire local. And so we hired, we usually hire PAs, we hire assistant camera people, we hire sound people, and those were all Buffalo folks. And everybody was fantastic, and was great at their job, and then you also get to see the city a little bit through their own eyes, and everybody knows where to go and where to take you. So all those things together really made it a fantastic shoot for us.
Amazing, very happy to hear that. So now to dig in a little deeper to landscape and location. I think, to me anyway, in both of your films, landscape is either kind of a character unto itself, or it's a force that's shaping a character. Do you mind speaking a little bit to that in regard to each of your films? You can totally disagree with my assumption too. Everything's fair game.
Well, I think what we tried to communicate with the film was that Rick was a reflection of the reaction to his environment. And so the Buffalo that he came up in was extremely segregated, racist. He came up in a community that didn't have many resources. His mother ran numbers. So his world was fast and furious. And that fast and furious nature, I believe, translated into the man he would become and ultimately the music he would make.
I think, like I said, going back to even just visually, we wanted to make sure that the audience felt the darkness and the emptiness of the character, kind of outside of herself. She carried this entire journey on her shoulders, but the environment she was in had a lot to do with how she was feeling. Again, she lived off the environment too. So just, like I said, visually, and sound-wise too, that silence in the snow, the silence in the train yard, like there's a lot of aspects of Buffalo that work so well with the character and help bring the character's emotions out even more so than she was ever doing.
Question, is there a boxing scene in Buffalo?
Not too much that I know of. I did find a gym that I was actually able to train at while I was here because I'm always in training. So there's not much of a boxing scene, but there is a small boxing scene.
DC?
I don't know. I don't remember the gym. No.
There's a gym somewhere near here that keep moving around.
It was a really good gym. They had boxing, jiu-jitsu. They had it was huge. And they had a few rings in there, and there was some people in there sparring. So I was like, thank God, I found my people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I did know, I kind of loved in your film this kind of interplay between internal space and external space, and all these internal spaces were like crammed and dirty, and they felt like kind of, unsteady, just an uncomfortable space. Do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of interplay between internal and external?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing consistent about her. You know what I mean? She was consistently wanting to find her sister, but there's nothing. She wasn't settled anywhere. She's living out of a shelter. She's working at a diner. Her whole world is turned upside down. So every internal space you walk into, or you go, you switch into scenes. Even being in the car with her trainer, is just everything is very unsettling. It kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat. The scene that really was really deep for me, and even it was just a room in was it Polish social club when they're having a talking circle. Even that space there is just the stairs she walks up to, the office that she's in. It's just it kind of sucks you into her emptiness. You know what I mean? So it really we played around a lot with that. We wanted the outside world to kind of be her inside her head, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And it articulates itself really well visually. So kudos to all of you.
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about Rick James in his time in Canada and how that location might have shaped him a bit. I think a lot of people in Buffalo and people that are introduced to Rick through like Dave Chappelle show or something like that are largely unaware of the early formative years of his career and the types of musicians he was playing with in Canada. Do you want to speak a little bit about how that shaped him and how he used the archival content to create a landscape?
Well, Levi, who's also a Buffalo native, who's in the band, said, there was nothing for us here to do. We wanted to leave town, and there was a war happening, so joining the military was an option for some African American men at that time, which is not the best option, but they felt like anything might be better than what they were dealing with here. So Rick was, I guess, in a similar situation, but he didn't, he was in the reserves. And so if you show up when you're supposed to show up, you can actually avoid going to war. And Rick just didn't take that part of the assignment very seriously. So they were looking for him, and so what many people did, many Americans did at that time, was flee to Canada. And so he gets on a bus to Canada, and as soon as he gets off, someone's calling him the N-word, and some friendly Canadians, white Canadians, come to his rescue, and then it turns out they're members of the band that would back Bob Dylan and help him go electric. So here's this guy who had musical aspirations, and fresh off the bus, he's in a world of a scene that's starting to happen, that he is a welcome individual. Here is this authentic African-American musician. All of these artists were fans of African-American culture and music, and so here's a real African-American guy who thinks that they're cool, who's interested in what they're doing and wants to have a cultural exchange and wants to, be down with what they're doing. And so he finds his family, and he winds up in a band with Neil Young and signs to Motown, and then gets into it with the manager, and other members of the band claim they didn't know that Rick was AWOL. I don't know if I fully believe that, but apparently the manager, quote unquote, squealed on Rick, and then he had to go to prison, military prison. And so he goes back to the United States, eventually gets out, goes to Canada, and says, "Hey, where are all my friends?" And they all went to LA to get record deals, and many of them did. So he wound up being this Forrest Gump character of culture, and way ahead of his time, because so many times, in so many ways, African Americans are put in a box in terms of what they can do and what they can be interested in. And you look at artists today like Pharrell, someone who was interested in skateboarding, interested in things that weren't traditionally black, Rick was that guy 30 years before that. And so, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what we believed when we made this film. That's what made him very contemporary. He's a very man of now. Although he was many years ahead of his time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Avant-garde.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, like, the geography, it was so striking to me, too. Sacha said before, my dad actually is from Buffalo. And went to Bennett High School, where Rick was, I guess, kicked out, according to as the stories are told. The power of that geography was I was already feeling that just from my own background. But then when we came up here and we started digging into the story, when we came up here and filmed, and we also went and did some filming in Toronto later. I don't know. I just feel like that the locus of the two cities and the connections that you have with Toronto and Canada, and Canada has vice versa. I mean, the reason that my grandmother and my grandparents ended up in Buffalo in the first place was they were from immigrant Jewish families that had immigrated to Canada, and so we're Canadian. But my grandmother's big move away from the family was to come down to America, and that was Buffalo. That was the only, that's the only place that you could reach when you didn't have very much money. So that interplay back and forth across the border between Toronto, or between Canada and Buffalo, was something that I knew about from my own history. But then seeing it in Rick's story, which was very different, as theirs was immigrant Jewish and his was inner city black, was really interesting. And so sort of filming the landscapes here, filming the landscapes up in Yorkville, where so the landscapes that Sacha was talking about were the neighborhoods that Rick was from, the Perry Projects, and the neighborhoods surrounding there that he talked about, and some of the band guys talked about where they were from. And then Rick goes up to Toronto. Sacha described it, but he's in Yorkville, which is kind of like the Greenwich Village of Canada during the 60s. And there's row houses, and there's groovy people, and there's cafes, and there's, it's like a whole... So anyway, just all that geography obviously was like an incredibly important part of the story, and very cool to experience in person.
Yeah, we are a place on many borders, actually. We've got Canada, then we've got Tuscarora Nation out to the north, we've got Tonawanda Seneca to the east, and Cattaraugus Seneca to the south. We've got 6 nations just over the border. So you have a lot of really interesting kind of cross-cultural exchange that just goes on mimetically. My grandmother also was born in Canada, first-generation Italian, came over here, gave up her citizenship for no apparent reason. It's funny, too, because Buffalo used to be the big city until the 70s, and then Canada was like open immigration, whereas we were, on our trajectory towards now. And then that city exploded, right? That's why it's like there's the old city and the new city, so it's really interesting. Just talking a little bit about cross-cultural and borders that you see and borders that you don't see, and all borders being, of habitation. Can you talk to me a little bit about, and it's just curiosity too, because I'm not entirely sure, are we in a place, or are we in a place, like a specific place in your film, Kitchen of Fair One? Or are we in kind of like, it could be any...
Yeah, we wanted to, originally, Joseph, he wanted to kind of base it off of my tribe and where I'm from, but because of the context of the film, I really thought it was important to kind of make it up to the audience to decipher, and we didn't want to make it location specific, nor did we want to make it tribal specific, because it's a problem that doesn't happen just in Canada, just in North America. It happens to every indigenous person in every land, and it also happens everywhere. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't just say it just happens here. Also, the film is not in any way, shape, or form an answer to the problem. It's just awareness that this is a problem. So it's definitely not, we really wanted to make sure it wasn't anywhere specific. But just the location, the look of Buffalo matched exactly the context and the themes that we were trying to portray in the film.
I was hoping I just didn't miss something and it was intentionally not very specific. It could be anywhere because it could happen to anyone, especially if you're an indigenous woman.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful. Not wonderful that it happens, but I think that works really well. So let me ask a little bit. We don't have too much longer. Oh, we have a little bit. characters or alienate any specifics. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that? And then also, what are you hoping to do with Rick James?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, awareness is pretty much my aim personally and collectively, especially with this film. With my boxing background, I explained, I just, use my platform. And since I'm on a stage and I have people's attention, I'm going to bring awareness to something that needs more awareness to it. So that's number one. That's what we aim to do with this film. Also, too, to show 2021 that Native American people can be casted in films as leading roles and not just a Native person. Like, we don't need to be in period pieces. You can cast me as a Marvel superhero. You can cast me as a detective. It's really important for me to have representation personally and collectively for Native Americans, especially Black Natives, because we get zero representation in film and mainstream media. So that's something I definitely want people to take away from it, as well as there's not one Native-looking person. We're indigenous looking to where we're from. So I'm from the New England area where there's the salt water, and I'm from Rhode Island and Massachusetts where our hair is not going to be pinned bone straight like Southwest natives. It's going to be poofy and curly and indigenous to where we live. So it's just educational as well. There's this one-dimensional thought that, if you're Native American, you live on a reservation, you get a check every month, and you play bingo, and you're alcoholic, and it's just so outdated that I really am just here to bring awareness to who we are, what we are, and that, again, we're still here. We do things. We're doctors, we're teachers, we're professional fighters, we're world champions, we're filmmakers, we're everything, and we're going to keep striving. So that's really what I want to bring personally.
Yeah, down with that. Thank you.
Well, with Rick James, I have a background in journalism, and it's weird because people have said, the balance that you struck was really, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, there's this thing called journalism that people have forgotten about because everything is supposedly fake news and people are confused and don't know what to believe anymore. But I just think if you're fair to a subject, then you can follow the tenets of journalism and be okay. And so we know that Rick James was a brilliant musician, and we wanted to give people more insights into his brilliance and understanding of what his influence, who influenced him, who he influenced, and the legacy of that. But simultaneously, there's no way you can competently tell that story without unpacking some things that aren't that nice. Because he's a human being. We're not all nice every day. There's days where I'm nice and days where I might not be nice. And so if you made a film about me and I was just nice every day, that's just bullshit. So say that again?
You'd be Ned Flanders, right?
Right. So we just set out to be fair to Rick, and to be fair to Rick is to unpack everything without holding back. And his daughter, Ty, was an executive producer, and I knew as a journalist that one of the first questions would be, well, his daughter's an executive producer. How did that work out? And we told her, myself and Steve said, listen, you've got to trust us, and you've got to let us do our thing, and we have to tell the whole story without sugarcoating it, and she agreed with that. And so when you have people who cooperate, who are a part of estates or families, and understand that, like, in order to do history justice, in order to do your loved one justice, you have to show warts and all. And so that's what we did. And, I want people to watch the film and make decisions for themselves. There are people who are upset that, how could you make a film about a guy who was so horrible to women and blah, blah, blah. But then you learn that he himself was sexually abused at a young age. You learn that he was physically abused at a young age. And I'm not saying that justifies what he did or excuses what he did. I just want to give you all the pieces to the puzzle, and you can assemble it how you want. But as long as I provided all the pieces, how it turns out in your mind in the end, that's completely on how you assembled it. So.
The only thing I would add is that we want people to see it. So, it's on Showtime. It's a paid cable channel, so something that sometimes is difficult for some viewers. But the little secret is you can get a free 30-day trial and watch a bunch of good stuff. including our film Bitchin and some Sacha's earlier films and some other great stuff. But it's great to have opportunities to show it in person. So we're really grateful to you guys for having us, and for people to understand that it's a story that crosses over. We tried to make something that was for music fans and not for music fans, for not music fans, people that didn't know about Rick. I mean, what I'm seeing just in a very cursory way when you look at Twitter, you look at some of the only way you can sort of see how your viewership is happening. It seems like a lot of Rick James fans have found the film and are watching it. A lot of African American music fans are super excited about it. I would love there to be, more white people that are watching the movie and understanding that Rick's impact was not just, he didn't just have black fans, but white people too. And I think it's getting out there. But it's like you make these things and then you just have no control over what happens to them. So as much as people who are watching or people who come to the festival or see it on Showtime, continue to spread the word. It's only been on for about a month, so it's still kind of in its early stages. So, just tell your friends.
Yeah, and friends, tonight at 7, we're going to show it at the North Park Theater, which is a gorgeous theater here, and I think you're going to love seeing it and hearing it there too, because sound is amazing in there, and sound is amazing in this film. So I think whether you love this human being or this, history is the time when we weren't there, right? So you go back through as a journalist, looking through facts, looking through archives, and kind of resculpt what you can from that history. But I will say, I tap my foot the whole time. I'm one, if I hear music and it's good, I can't help but move. But I do love the complex, kind of full, rounded, layered presentation that you provide of this human being. You really show us generosity too. The people like Tina Marie, producing other people's work, writing a lot of stuff for everyone, in his band and beyond. People are complicated. Not perfect. None of us.
That's the quote of the century. People are complicated. Everyone out there, remember that. People are complicated.
Let me ask you, what are we working on now?
I have a film that I've been developing with the writer-director for 6 years, and we have 2 people cast. I cannot name, but we hopefully will be filming in early 2022 in Miami. It's a period piece that takes place in that city, a narrative film. So just keep doing it. It'll happen eventually.
I'm very busy. Right now, I'm definitely taking the acting as serious as my boxing. I kind of fell in love with the whole art of acting and storytelling. Storytelling as an indigenous person is how we pass down history. And also, like I said last night, telling our stories is the first step of healing. We have to put it all on the table to really know what we need to fix and heal and get through. Telling these stories these meaningful stories that need to be told. Also, my name is Mikwunanog, many feathers, which means many talents. So, I'm just exploring these talents and whatever gifts creators gifted me with, there's no sense of keeping a gift to yourself, so I have to give it back to the world. Also, I'm still a very active professional fighter. I just won my second super lightweight world title in August. So now we have this. Thank you. So now I have 5 titles in 2 different weight classes, and we just entered into this 140-pound super lightweight world title tournament where everybody who has a belt will be fighting each other. So the first 2 girls will be fighting October 30th, and then myself and the other person will be fighting November 20th. And the winner of these 2 fights will be undisputed champion by February of 2022. So that's what I'm heading for. And I do have representation now, and like I said, I'm taking this acting thing really serious. So I'll balance it until I step out and bow out to this boxing thing the next couple of years and see where this acting thing takes me.
Amazing. Yeah, don't miss that fight. Want to watch Gailey win.
It'll be on the Zone app. Download it. It's easy. $10 a month, girl.
Speaking of representation, I'm finishing a 4-part series about race called Everything's Gonna Be All White, a brief study of Caucasians in 4 acts. And it's for Showtime, and it is sort of a look at American history from the perspective of people of color, which we haven't really heard. At a pretty broad way. We have Native folk, African American, Asian, a real mixed bag of what America is supposed to be. Talking about things like, racial stuff. So that's going to be on Showtime at the top of the year.
All right, nice. Is there humor woven in? Because the title kind of tickled me right now.
There's nothing like tickling white people with humor, but I find that humor is a very important tool to sort of educate people, because some of, in the tradition at least of folks of color in America, the only way to get through stuff is to laugh. The only way to get through stuff is to create art and music and film and fine art and all of these dance, all of these things are a reflection of and reaction to the environment and how we process it. So humor is very important. I think humor is a sign of intelligence. If I sit down with you and 2 minutes into it and you have no sense of humor, it's tough, right? So humor is an important part of it. I mean, if I named it anything other than Everything's Going to Be All White, and it was very serious, like white people are evil or something like that, it would never get made. So everything's a Trojan horse kind of movement,
I still like that title. I would have laughed.
Yeah, that's great. I'm working on a series of projects, also for Showtime. Sacha's also involved, which are all basically celebrating hip hop's 50th anniversary, which is 2023 is the sort of accepted, or 1973, the birth of hip hop. So 2023, there's a series of projects that we're working on, a bunch of other filmmakers and producers that are all different kind of hip hop stories. And so there's 2 feature docs that I'm particularly working on personally. One of them is a sort of graffiti story, and another one is about sort of very important, influential early music video show out of New York City called Video Music Box. So those 2 films and a bunch of other stuff in development. But it's been a super busy time, and it's really fun to have a film like Bitchin, which is sort of been doing festivals and been out in the world. And so you can always, come out of the edit room or come off of a shoot where, everything is kind of rattling around in your head and you feel kind of overwhelmed, and then, go to a screening or come to a festival or, turn on TV and see something that you worked on that's on there and be like, we'll get there. It'll eventually be that, and it's all nice and clean and pretty. So I feel lucky to be in those positions.
Awesome. Yeah, I did catch Cream of the Clan. It was pretty good.
What did you catch?
Cream of the Clan, isn't that the series?
I have to talk about something else.
Oh, that's a different series. Okay, my bad. That's good. We should check it out. If I was on Showtime too. Okay, well, let me ask a question that a very tired person should always ask. Is there anything that you wish I had asked you before we wrap up? In the audience, if you have a question too, just raise your hand. And if you just want to hang out, that's cool as well.
I feel well asked.
You feel well asked? Okay.
I feel like you covered everything. Did well, moderator.
Okay.
We didn't get into the whole thing about like buffalo wings.
Oh.
Because the last time I was here, I didn't realize it was like that it really came from. I didn't know.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know about that.
Oh, we take it very seriously with Buffalo Wings. I think, Steve, we talked a little bit about the best place. And I said Gabriel's Gate, but that's
what I went last night.
So that's the question. Did you get wings while you were here?
We did. We did on our shoot because Anna told us to go to Gabriel's Gate, and we went. The problem is half of my crew is vegetarian, which that's just
That's unfair.
that's a pain in the butt. But
I'm the vegan, so I was just...
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. They're out
Dip
there.
in sauce. You dip it in some cauliflower.
So
I got
we-
you.
So I do have a question for you because I'm not super familiar, just so you know. But I would think the things that motivate me, because what motivates you, and what are things that are a little bit like a punch in the gut to you, that you find that you have to overcome as makers of this art in this industry?
Thank you.
For that question. I find stories to be my main motivator. Just getting people like Kaylee on screen. It was her first time acting in a feature film as the lead, and she carried it. It's such an incredible performance. Actually, it reminded me of their lead in Titane, if anyone has seen that yet, who was also cast off of Instagram, and it was her first feature, but just such a visceral performance. And the thing that I find the hardest are the industry standards in our business, which is the reason why IATSE is probably going to strike. And I definitely support everyone in that union. I'm a producer, and I'm a narrative film producer, so a standard day for crew is 12 hours. That means a standard day for production is 14. And we do see, 16 plus hour days. I also spent years working in the camera department. I pulled focus on a Spike Lee movie. I had a cinematographer credit on a feature doc that was at Sundance back in the day called Kink. And those hours are brutal. I have seen a 22-hour workday. And I'm over it. And even though I'm a producer and I technically, create the budgets, raise the money, and I'm in charge, I am working with investors and others who expect industry standards. And so those are really important for me. And so, anyway, go IATSE.
I'm just tipping my toe in this industry, but it's very, very parallel to boxing industry. The business part of business and entertainment business is the same. Whether you're boxing, you're singing, you're dancing, or you're in front of a camera, it's very, very, very similar. I do love the fact that I can be so creative in this industry, and my motivation, I can already tell, is just the representation and the people I have to represent a big group of people. Indigenous people, Cape Verdean people, mixed indigenous, and just the underrepresented people. It's my huge motivator. It's the same way, and it's the same motivation I found when I box. A slogan, I guess you could call it, fight for all nations. It's just that. They don't fight for me. I could care less if anybody watches my fight or likes my Instagram post. They don't fight for that. Belts are nice, they're great. Money's great. We don't make a lot of money as women boxers, but when I get the email from, the kid that was going to commit suicide because he's half black and half, whatever, First Nations from Canada, but he saw me fighting on HBO, now he has, more motivation. He's proud of what he is because he used to get bullied at school. That's my motivation. When I start getting more respect from tribal people and elders from other tribes, and not even close to my tribe, that told me I was, just a black girl trying to be Indian, but now they give me respect because I'm putting us on the map as a positive role model. That's what's my motivation. I've had a tough road with boxing. I wasn't always a world champion. I didn't always have a manager. I didn't always have a promoter. Damn it, I didn't have a trainer at times. I'm kind of self-made, but I won 3 world titles before I even had a manager. You know what I mean? So, I came from a place where a lot of Reis kids can find familiar. Even other kids, inner city kids. You ain't gonna be anything, you come from this family, you might as well just, give up now. I find motivation in people telling me what I can't do. Going into this film industry now, I know, getting typecasted or having some kind of, you don't look native enough, or you don't look black enough. I know those are already the challenges that I'm gonna probably face. So that's something I don't like, but I've been through it before. So we'll just kind of see what this industry brings to me. But times are changing, so we'll see.
Yeah, same thing for me. Representation is really important. My father was a filmmaker at a time when there weren't a lot of filmmakers who looked like him, and there are more filmmakers who look like me now, but there aren't enough. And I think that anyone can tell a story. I'm not saying that there are people who aren't of color who can't tell of color stories, but we need more people of color to tell their own stories. It makes a difference. There are things that people just don't see. As I'm not a woman, so there might be some things as a man that I might not see as a woman. And as a person of color, there are little things and nuances that I can pick up on whether I'm working with the team or by myself, that make the difference. And I think that if the folks that you're telling the stories about, if what you're doing resonates with them, it's going to resonate with everyone. And for the longest time, we haven't had the opportunity to tell our stories and or, have things that resonate with us. So I feel very privileged to be in a position, being a journalist for many years and then transitioning to documentary filmmaker, and we'll see where it goes after that. But having the opportunity to tell these stories and encourage other people and give other people opportunities to do the same is something that motivates me.
Yeah, I can't really add too much to those three things. I mean, I sort of agree with all of them and feel all of them deeply. I think too often the power and the decision-making of who gets to tell these stories and who gets real funding, who gets real support, who gets the promotion, which we've seen. You can do something amazing, but if people don't hear about it, then people don't see it. So those decisions are so closely held by a very small, powerful group of people, and the people that they then have to answer to are it's really usually just kind of corporate money, and so that's frustrating because we're trying to tell stories about people that you haven't heard about before or underrepresented groups. So we're trying to diversify our storytelling teams and bring everybody in. And then when you're constantly sort of serving the almighty dollar all the time, it doesn't make sense for, especially the kind of work that we're doing, documentary or independent film. It's like, your guys' film is incredible. It shouldn't have to make $200 million. It should be supported, for the fact that you're doing it. And there's other countries where that kind of work is supported, and in ways that America just never has. So, I mean, we could talk about this forever, but just the frustrations are often just about how it's always about, is this going to make money, and who's it going to make money for?
So every one of you kind of had a common thread as you were sharing that. And the one thing I find fascinating is because all of you want to get your story out, and you want your platform to be heard, and you want to continue this to further generations, because you all spoke of wanting other people to speak out and raise awareness and have more people partake in that from your community, right? So my question is, do any of you have any plans for community outreach or to reach into the communities that you really want to see this progressive? Like, as far as being a role model or saying, okay, look at, I am, like you said, African and Native American filmmaker, or I'm an actor. Would you go into your community? And I'm just saying this like in a very positive thing, because you are a role model, you're all role models, and I think it would be stellar if you were out there in your community trying to get this next younger generation to continue to tell those stories and to empower them to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And actually, for the last 4 or 5 years, I have been going to different communities and reservations and just telling my stories, but also listening to theirs and also getting more information of what I can tell other people. Like, we don't need Black people, Native people to hear our stories. We know what goes on, so we need to be in front of audiences like you that don't know. So absolutely, I have this big dream of I call it a res tour that I've had the blueprints to for the last 8 years. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I have gone to these different reservations and events, and just to talk to these kids. There was a documentary called The Boxes of Brule, and the director of them asked me if I would go to their reservation, because I was going to a reservation about 3 hours away from there for a VAWA conference for Violence Against Women Act for missing and murdered Indigenous women. I jumped on the opportunity. I got to hang out with the kids that boxed because they saw me on HBO, and I got to hang out with them at their school and just go to their house, meet their aunties, meet their grandmothers, and I love that. I'd rather do that than work any day. So absolutely. I mean, like you said about funding, I wish there was more funding for things like that. I still have to work, but I've been a residential counselor and a mentor for young teen girls since 2008. And I still talk to these girls to this day. I don't even work for the company anymore, but somehow they find me. And I talk to them all the time. So that is my biggest motivator as well too, to be, you know, who I didn't have in my life, to kind of just have somebody be relatable. You know, oh, she looks like me, or she's been through something like I have, or something similar, and she's still going, kind of a thing. And it's funny because I've visited so many communities, and some communities are really upbeat, but then some communities are really, really, really just somber. Like, I speak to these people, and that just, it's this common, I learned about myself speaking to these communities where for a long time I didn't know why I felt like I wasn't worthy, or I wasn't worth anything. I wasn't supposed to be a champion. I was supposed to be somebody. But when I spoke to this specific community, everybody in there just had this similar thing, and I just knew it was just learned as genetic genocide. And somebody said something last night, it's time for us to stop being sad and start being angry, you know, stop making a change. So getting back to the grassroots part and getting back to these communities is just a constant reminder. These are the people who will back me. This is why I fight or act or just speak. You know, it's Indigenous Peoples Day weekend. We have a bunch of events going on in North America and probably Canada too, because we support one another. But I'll be headed to Newton, Mass to speak at an event there too. And I'm still in the middle of training, but every chance I get to go back to a community, like you said, you find new things. You find a new perspective. These young kids or these elders or something. I don't want to just talk to talk. You know, I've been there too, but I also don't want to forget where I came from. So thank you for that.
Well, it's another way to find meaning too, right?
Absolutely.
For me, you know, I'm also partners in a production company, and so I try to make sure that there are folks who look like me who have gigs. And what I've heard in so many instances, that it's very rare that you see this many people of color on these shoots. So that's what for now, is my contribution, trying to make sure that these young folks get these gigs that are kind of hard to get.
And I thought it was awesome how many women were in roles that you don't usually see women in too. So it's important.
Yeah, so if I can just encourage you with this, because, and this is going to sound really stupid. Sorry, I'm a teacher by trade, right? So I'm like loving all of this. And so one teacher said to me in high school, do what you would do for the rest of your life for free, because you love it and it makes a difference, and the money will come. And what you are doing is wonderful. So I know that maybe you haven't seen the big whatever, I don't know what your histories are, but I would encourage you to just keep doing that. And then the other thing, that if I could just be, like, this is personal, but I think we always find ourselves in a position of needing a mentor, like needing someone that you're looking up to and that you're feeding off of, that is sewing into you. But we also have to hand our hand down to those other people who are looking up to us. And so we're always kind of that middle, we're that link that connects where we want to be, and the people that really look at us thinking, well, I want to be there, you know, to raise each other and pull each other up. So I just want to say thank you, because I think you're all doing that, and I think it's really cool, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that support. That's really important to us, so it's very cool.
I think that might be a beautiful place to end. I was going to ask other questions, but maybe that's for another time. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Steve Revo, Sacha Jenkins, Kaylee Reis, Kim Parker. Both of these films are totally amazing.